Recording in progress.
Hello, colleagues. Sorry I couldn't be in person today to present this to you, but I'm making this ahead of time so that during class you won't miss out on my presentation. So looking at the PBLO C, what I wanted to look at was with Diane, we looked at how to determine why traditional assessments are used more frequently than authentic assessments. So looking at our first analysis here, we determined that in the interview, authentic assessment is defined as being the opposite to traditional assessment, which is kind of focusing on having students sit in the rows and take an exam. Authentic assessment instead focuses on getting the students motivated to find real-world solutions to the problems. And the significance of the term authentic in the context of the authentic assessment is that it's focused on rich learning involving real-world problems that can have diverse outcomes. If we look at the characteristics of authentic assessment compared to traditional assessments, we know how students get to know well in advance about the authentic assessment. It can have complex multiple answers and solutions. It can contain repetitive tasks, and it has connections to real world scenarios. It provides more of an insight into the student's knowledge and their way of thinking. Some of the barriers identified by Dr. Barber to the implementation of authentic assessment more so has shown that it's focused on systemic barriers, as well as it involves a role shift in teachers, and also the fact that we currently have a merit-based system. So looking after the analysis here, the process that Diane and I were brainstorming when we came to looking at a problem here is first we thought about authentic assessment being full of rich learning opportunities, making it very worthwhile. But in order for this to happen, you have to have a effort and creativity. And also the fact that authentic assessment requires more time and that there's systemic barriers which prevent teachers from doing that. So what we came to was finally, if authentic assessment can be proven to be very beneficial for student learning, then what is preventing teachers from engaging in that authentic assessment? So that's where we came to our problem. Why do we still engage in traditional methods of assessment more often, not engage in authentic assessment, and as in the educators? So the importance of this is that authentic assessment is a way of assessing students, which will result in a deeper understanding of the topic at hand. And due to the many benefits of authentic assessment, teachers are interested, in implementing more authentic assessment into their practice. But there are many barriers which can prevent teachers from being able to do so. So one thing that I looked at as well was, what does the traditional assessment look like and sound like, and what would authentic assessment look like and sound like? So we're all familiar with our traditional assessment, where it's students sitting individually in rows and working silently on a test or exam. And authentic assessment has more so involved students getting up and moving and working together, collaborating with others. They create portfolios of their work that are then assessed, creating performances and presentations, highlighting their processes. And these are sort of things that are all missed when you just focus on traditional assessment, because traditional assessment focuses on, here's the material, learn the material, here's the exam, how'd you do on the exam? That's what counts. But it kind of ignores the thinking process and the problem solving that happened along the way. And authentic assessment is meant in a way that it's not so much only about the end task, but it's also the process of how did you get there along the way. And it also involves like working together with others, just as in a real world situation, you would have to work with others in order to solve the problem. Usually in a workplace, they're always on a team, and rarely do people solve problems on their own in the workplace. So it's the same kind of thing that's focused on in authentic assessment. You're on a team and you guys have to figure out how the solution to the problem together. And also looking at synthesis here, would the traditional assessment feel like to those being assessed? And what would authentic assessment feel like? So what we looked at here was, traditional assessment focuses on like true and false, guessing game, multiple choice, essays, short answer questions. So the traditional assessments are usually considered standardized in that you have only one time to do well on it, and you need to finish it by a particular time. So as in, one test should fit everybody. And it feels kind of like a regurgitation of what the teacher taught or the student's ability to memorize what they were learning. And, multiple choice isn't so reliable, and true and false is just mainly easy to score. It's hard to conclude whether the true student actually knows the right answer because 50% of the time they might just guess. And multiple choice, it's difficult to write successful questions. An authentic assessment, although it requires more time and effort, students are required to think more because there's not always an explicit answer that's shown. There's more chances to grow, even if the student tries a solution and they fail, they may still have the opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge at different time and different situation, or revise their answer and come up with a different solution based on what they learned from their previous failure. So they put in all their hard work, and the teacher is more of a facilitator. All the learning and obtaining information is done by the student. And it kind of helps the student feel more connected to reality because they can use their own interpretations to come up with a solution. And how would authentic assessment impact practices such as grading? So one thing that I found when I read this dissertation actually by Taylor in 2011 was that she looked at the impact of students and scoring them on the Bloom's taxonomy. And she found that a lot of the times their understanding was beyond the knowledge and comprehension levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And it kind of brought the students up to the top 3 cognitive levels. So they were doing a lot of analysis, synthesis, and evaluation in the majority of the students' assessments. And while their cognitive demand increased, their performance did not increase or decrease on the proficiency level rubrics, which is typically what's used in our education system. They oftentimes performed near the 3 level on the scaled rubrics, and that's the majority of the students, even though their cognitive demand increased. So this indicated that she found that students were able to meet the challenges at varying levels of cognitive demand. And so what was found was that the authentic assessment appears to be appropriate and necessary, especially with increasing accountability around standardized test performance, especially because if more standardized testing is moving online, or kind of how things were forced to move online with the pandemic, those standardized tests were not very reliable because you couldn't be completely 100% sure that all the work on the standardized test was the student's own, which is why also highlights how important authentic assessments are for online learning. And how would authentic assessment impact pedagogical and other curricular practices? And this is a big one because authentic assessment has a big impact, because oftentimes in most, if not all, educational institutions, each subject and discipline is kept separately in like a separate kind of box. You know, this is like the math hallway, we only do math there. This is the English hallway, only do English there. But in authentic assessments, it's focuses on real world problem solving. And in the real world, things are not separated like that. They're not like, okay, this is a math problem, you're only going to use math to solve this problem. Because in the real world, you need to combine knowledge from other disciplines and put it together to solve a problem. And this is something that needs to happen in order for authentic assessment to be implemented in the curriculum, is to get out of this idea that, you know, we have to assess math separately, we have to assess this separately, but put everything kind of integrated together in that way that you have an assessment, a problem that has multiple different subjects and disciplines that are put into it. So you're kind of using all of your skills and knowledge together at the same time, rather than trying to go to like a classroom and focus only on specific subject. And looking at the next steps here. So some of the solutions that we can see to helping teachers involve more authentic assessments was to follow the authentic assessment toolbox. And this includes identifying the standards, selecting authentic tasks, identifying the criteria, and creating the rubric, kind of where it shows guidelines for how students are to approach the problem. So it kind of gives them the parameters which they can work within, and then it's up to them to come up with the solution. As well, we have to look at providing continuous feedback and encouragement to students to help them reflect on their solutions. And this gives them the opportunity to grow and the time to adjust their work. And authentic assessments should also be used alongside traditional assessments. So one thing that I found when I was doing my research was a lot of the times authentic assessments did have a couple of issues with making sure that the grading is staying consistent, so that all students are given the equal opportunities, and making sure that the design of the assessment can be understood, and kind of that every student is given the equal opportunity to succeed. So in this case, you shouldn't focus in on just traditional or just authentic, but rather a combination of the two would be a good solution, because it kind of gives you the best of both worlds, because there is a couple benefits of traditional assessment that we don't want to completely ignore. And this could be a more practical way of implementing kind of the fact that all the students may be given an equal opportunity, and that the assessment can be more like consistent with the students. And also another solution to approaching this is making sure that authentic assessment requires the integration of subjects and disciplines together. You won't have authentic assessment without combining multiple subjects together. So this is a necessity in order to implement any sort of authentic assessment, is to have multiple subjects, as real world problems do involve. And these are just the references. So thank you for listening to my presentation. Once again, I apologize for not being able to be there today. If you have any questions about my presentation, please send me a message on Slack, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. All right, thank you for your attention, and bye for now.